So in terms of the health and wellness NASIMCO portfolio, this portfolio was built in one goal in mind, is to bring holistic and faith-centered wellness support for our community. So today's webinar is a meaningful one and the first of many, inshallah. So if you are interested in more of these or would like to suggest any new topics for the future, please do reach out to us. And I will put my contact information in the chat box as well. We also have a program called the Wellness Champion. So I just want to speak a little bit about this because I think it's an important one. Isn't about being an expert or having it all figured out in terms of the health and wellness sector, but really if you know someone who is committed to the health and well-being and leads with intention, we would love for them to join our team. So being a champion allows us to kind of work on different types of events and programs for our community and have proper ideas that come out that so that we can then make sure that each and every community within the North America region has whatever they need for their community to become stronger. So again, we are trying to find someone that normalizes talking about well-being, who creates safe spaces for healing. And so if today's conversation moves you and if this is something that you are interested in, please do reach out to me as well. Now, why mental health? Why is this our first topic? I want to speak from the heart for a moment because mental health in our Islamic community has far too long become something that is just whispered about and not really discussed. And we have always been taught that Islam is about compassion, patience, and care for the heart and mind, not just the body. So this is why we chose the mental health focus for our first webinar. And we want to make sure that this is something that we can all relate to, but also before we even talk about our health of our body, we really want to make sure that our minds are stable and our soul is rejuvenated. And before we talk about anything else, community growth or purpose, we want to make sure that we are cared for first. So without further ado, I do want to introduce our new speaker here, Saarah Bhokari. And has completed her PhD researching the ethical and spiritual dimensions of soul striving within Islam. Her academic path has taken her from Islamic studies to an education degree at Oxford to a master's in international relations at LSE, focused on Islam, global politics, building an undergraduate degree in international politics as well. Beyond academia, she's worked across youth education, international development, heritage research, media production, humanitarian services, interfaith relations, and so on and so forth. She is a fantastic individual and a wonderful human being, and I'm very happy to have her with us today. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Saarah Bhokari. Assalamu alaikum, Saarah.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaista, and thank you so much for such a lovely introduction and well-being initiative introduction for us all today, and the fantastic work that you're doing at NASIMCO as well. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody here as well today. And inshallah, we have a very fruitful session where we all benefit, including myself as well, inshallah, and would like to make it as interactive as possible as well. So without further ado, we'll start. And thank you again, Shaista, for that beautiful introduction.
Thank you.
Okay, so just to begin, I'd like to send my condolences and greetings to you all as we gather in this gathering today in honor of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. We all hold a special place in our hearts for him, and that's why we've gathered here on a Sunday. So thank you for taking your time out to be here. Today, our presentation or the workshop is going to be on divine mindfulness. And I pray with that in mind, we take away things that we can reflect on today. It is going to be a very reflective session, and things that we can actually carry forward into our lives, our daily lives and our routines throughout the month of Muharram and obviously beyond as well, inshallah. I extend like condolences to you all on his shahadat, and I will now upload a presentation that I'll be working through in the session today. So hopefully you should be able to see this. Okay, so the idea of divine mindfulness and why we've chosen the subject today is because Imam Sajjad alayhi salam represents a story of pain and suffering. but that's not the be all and end all of his life story. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam represents an individual who utilized the suffering and the journey that he went through to transmute into divine remembrance, to alchemize into divine beauty, to move towards objectives that were rooted in divine centeredness. And when we speak about him, he is the perfect example in times like we're going through today, where there is so much suffering in the world, where there is so much suffering on our brothers and sisters, our communities especially, as well as the journeys we as individuals hold as we move towards the divine. We want to, in this session, be present with our whole selves. Now, we will do an anchoring activity in a few slides to come, but to begin, I'm just going to give you an outline of what we hope to achieve in today's session, inshallah. If I can, yeah, not the greatest of text, so please do mind me. The aims and objectives of this session is going deeper into the meaning of divine mindfulness, reflections on 7 anchors on what divine mindfulness really means for us in our lifetime, and also how we can also turn this idea or concept inwards into ourselves to reflect. To do this, we're going to use some exemplary lines from Sahifa Sajadiya, as well as some reflection prompts. So what I advise you all to do is, if you can, please have a pen and paper with you, something that you can write on, perhaps even your phone if you want to take notes. But we'll have reflection prompts throughout the session, and you're welcome to engage as much as you like. If you'd like to write in the comment section, you can, if you have any thoughts on the conversation that we're having. Alternatively, I've tried to draw you into the conversation as much as I can at various points as well. So without further ado, we'll begin. I want you to just hold in your mind your thoughts and your reflections as we begin. These questions that are on the screen at the moment. So what are you consciously holding as you enter this room today? What parts of you do you want to stay present within this session? And what parts are you choosing to set aside outside the door so you can be present here fully? When we talk about mindfulness, we refer to this idea of presence, awareness, being anchored in the here and now, being reflective. So we're not only just the participants of what happens to us in life, we're also the observers of ourselves. And I find in my own therapeutic training and as a counselor and through various work that I've done, the sessions, even in training, would begin with questions like this. What do you mindfully want to bring into a space, and what do you want to keep behind? So I'd like you all to just briefly do an internal analysis of yourself, a brief internal scan of where you find yourself in this present moment. And truthfully, it could be anything. So for example, it could be that I've had a pretty long week. It's been a pretty long weekend. I'm here now, but now I want to focus on Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. I want to focus on being able to draw his divine light into my heart as an inspiration. I want to focus on being present with you all here today as we navigate this as a journey together. So this is some of my own reflections, but please do take a moment to just reflect yourself on what exactly these words mean. And I'll just be taking some pauses as I talk, so you have the time to also take a moment to reflect on what you want to bring to the space today. Okay, if you can keep these reflections with you as we journey through the presentation together today, it'll be good to keep coming back to as well. So to begin with the definition of divine mindfulness, it's essentially the concept of mindfulness, which I mentioned is presence in the here and now, awareness of the self, observation of your thoughts, your emotions, your states, but it's within the paradigm of the divine. And what's so important for a faith believer is to understand that any mindfulness we do is not an initiation from us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not an initiation that begins with us. Our mindfulness is a response to the invitation Allah extends to us in every breathing, living moment of our lives. Allah is the ever mindful one. Allah is the ever aware one. Allah is the ever present one. When we tap into a sense of divine mindfulness, we are essentially returning this invitation to remember the one who ever holds us in his love, in his safety, in his embrace. And having Allah as a divine sort of context to our mindfulness changes the paradigm we work with when we talk about mindfulness. Because in modern psychology, they may use mindfulness, for example, as a tool. In the NHS, they may use it even in the UK, for example, um, working through stress, reducing stress, working through burnout. These are, modern concepts that are widely accepted in society as well. But for us as faith believers, it's guarded and safeguarded by being lovingly aware and knowing in your deep heart and your soul and your essence that you are held within Allah's presence. Allah is your audience. You are walking into the divine sanctuary of awareness of Allah's presence. And importantly, divine mindfulness isn't limited to place and time because Allah Himself is not limited to place and time. When we want to tap into this awareness of God, many people through suffering might ask the question, where is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Where is He when there's suffering happening? How do I turn to a God that I can't see? These questions come up for young people of all ages, in fact. People will question at various points in their life. The idea of mindfulness is that Allah is eternal and ever living beyond time and space. My teacher actually says this beautifully when speaking about mindfulness in the presence of God. And he says, if we were to look at Allah quantifiably, you want to move to a position of saying, okay, in the here and now, with this specific dua, in this moment, I want this answered. There's a sense of instant gratification or a yearning for the fulfillment of things based on time in the world we live in today. There's social media clicking, there's all these things that we get used to where we want to have an answer now. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works in a space beyond time, in a space beyond space. It's an existence that is just His awareness, just that and nothing else. So even psychologically, when we say bring mindfulness to a subject, we're not saying when does mindfulness begin and when does it end, or how do I start my mindfulness? What we're really saying is this awareness is always present. How do I tap into the presence that is always present? This sense of soul, the sense of the divine, the sense of a time and space beyond just the immediate material world that we live in. So the paradigm encompasses a sense of taqwa, if we talk about the Arabic linguistics, and tawakkul also in the taqwa. So when you have a sense of God consciousness, or some people say God fear, or piety, it's a willingness to be present and aware of God's presence in everything that we do. The khawf of God, the fear of God, or the deep reverential respect for God is also part of this paradigm. And that translates to having a sense of accountability and honesty with God. Okay, so it's not just that we're aware of God, we want to stand before Him as someone who is honest and aware that Allah sees every atom and fiber of your being. Nothing is hidden in that space. Therefore, self-honesty, self-accountability that comes from reverence and fear of God as an ultimate justice is important in this paradigm. And finally, divine mercy. Divine mercy is like the thread that holds these two together. Whilst khawf, fear of God is a choice, taqwa is a choice, divine mercy is ever present with Allah's mercy. This is why when we begin with intentions, we say, in the name of Allah, the what? The most beneficent, the most merciful. We refer to His mercy as the initiation of anything. So when we start this paradigm of divine mindfulness, we do so with the awareness that Allah is ever merciful. In this space, Allah is inviting us to His mercy. Now, just before we move to really speaking about what this paradigm entails in more depth with the anchors that we want to discuss today, I want you to keep these three concepts in mind throughout. Because when you have a sense of taqwa, a sense of khawf, a sense of rahmah, they're not working individually, they're working intertwined with one another, okay? A sense of piety and awareness of God and the true knowing of God, as Amir al-Mu'mineen says, the one who really knows themselves comes to understand the inner reality of God too. Okay, there's a relationship here between knowing yourself and your awareness of God, as well as your relationship building with God. The khawf obviously comes as a natural consequence of having an awareness and a natural consequence of genuinely seeking to know and understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And rahmah is a safe paradigm. Rahmah is a safe paradigm within which this mindfulness takes place. So these are our anchors that we'll be referring to today. And I've got this inspiration from the Sahifa itself because Sahifa Sajadiya will be the paradigm we're working through in today's workshop as well. So why have we taken Imam Sajjad as an inspiration? Do forgive me for just going through these steps in detail, but the academic in me needs to define everything. So that's where that's coming from. Imam Sajjad is an inspiration to us in this day and age, and indeed every day and age. It's because of the fact that he endured the worst of human atrocities and he suffered the worst of pain. And we can understand that suffering and pain is something incredibly difficult, traumatic for a human being to pass through. As Shaisa said, the mental health aspect of things, even the spiritual health, emotional health aspect of things are a natural consequence of suffering as well. He also, in the face of that pain, went on to write about the existential rights of human beings. And I want to take a moment to just understand how poignant that is. Anyone can suffer. Anyone can go through trauma. Anyone can go through XYZ, XYZ. It's the story of human existence that suffering is intertwined with it. But what you do in the face of that suffering, what you choose to do with that pain, is where Imam Sajjad becomes a true beacon of light for us as followers of him. Not only did he write extensively about the rights of human beings and the right of every organ in our bodies, he faced situations that would make anyone despair. But in the Sahifa, you see Raja, you see this hope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enlaced within the supplications he says to God. He turns that pain into a legacy of praising hope in God. And if someone can go through as much as he went through with so much conviction and belief still in the rahmah of God, it tells us that we owe it to ourselves as lovers and followers of this holy household to really understand the beauty and the words enlaced in Imam Sajjad's supplications and what that means for our lives today. As mentioned, these three concepts, what I'd really like you to do, because again, taking inspiration from the Sahifa, Imam Sajjad talks very personally in these du'as, very, very personally in conversation with God. And that's also a permission for you and I to realize that having a personal connection to God is fostered, it's chosen, it's something that's developed, it's something that's prioritized. These three aspects, we can have it on an external realm. I can show mercy to people that I love, people in my life, right? I can have fear of God in the way I pray my salah on time, for example. I can have taqwa in going to the mosque and attending programs. These are just examples I'm giving. But in reality, taqwa has to exist in the heart and the soul in order for the external to also have meaning. Khawf has to exist in the heart and soul, in the privacy of your time alone with God, in order for it to externally truly have meaning. And rahmah, mercy, has to exist in the heart and soul. We can believe in Allah's mercy and still believe that His mercy doesn't belong to you and I. In our heart of hearts, believe that something in me is not deserving of mercy. Something in me is not deserving of Allah's audience. Who am I to turn towards Him? But this paradigm is telling us that indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is holding us on this journey of trying to purify these traits within us and actually actualize them as the Imam does in the Sahifa and teaches us the epitome of doing so. So I've written here a bit about Gestalt therapy. It's about bringing the whole of yourself to a therapeutic space, okay? Gestalt is one of the philosophers who I really enjoy studying, in fact. He mentions that the sum of the parts of a human being actually come together to bring a whole picture and landscape. So if your soul is a painting, or a person that you know is standing in front of you, and they have this role that they play, this job that they play, this functionality in life, this member as a community or a family or a friendship group, XYZ, work, right? We all have all these identities. What Gestalt brings attention to is the wholeness of the holistic self. How does this apply to us? When we talk about the soul and the spirituality of the soul, it's the underlying facet. It's a foundational, you can say, positionality of a human being. It's that which underlies all else. It's the essence of who you are. That soul is connected to the fitra, which is imposed upon by God's own nature Himself, His names, His beauty, His blessings, okay? And that is what constitutes our consciousness of our soul. So to bring the wholeness of ourselves is to realize that whilst parts of us, as Imam Sajjad recognizes, pain is a part of life, pain is a part of the human journey. But on top of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the journey of moving towards Him means pain is not our exclusive, or suffering is not exclusive identity. It's something to be moved through with recognition of the wholeness of our soul, of our spiritual selves, of our hope to actualize these beautiful traits within us. So, in doing that, we become internally and externally aligned. If I'm someone who's acting out of God consciousness or mindfulness of my soul, the eternity in my soul, the hereafter of my soul, the reality of my soul, as opposed to just my material life, I'm going to be someone who strives towards internal and external alignment, internal and external authenticity, internal and external congruence, being aligned in your whole self. Saying, yes, I have this job, but I have it because I love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is my alignment. Allah is my whole self. Allah is my identity. Okay? I have this role in my life, yes, but I do it because I love Allah. I do it because I serve Allah. Ultimately, the whole self for a believer is anchoring in this identity of being rooted in God, such that pain can then be transmuted towards the divine. Pain then becomes a sense of purpose. So, I usually do intentions at the beginning of a session, and we had a brief reflection. But what I'd like you to do is just sit in your seats as we go into the main anchors in the next part of the session, and just to take a moment to pause and breathe, a moment to just be aware of Allah's presence. And I'd like you to just sit comfortably. They say in therapy that to be present and to be aware of yourself means to also allow your physical self to relax, to come to a state of calm. And if you can, just close your eyes in a brief moment of recognition that you are here in the here and now. A brief moment to just breathe in the awareness of Allah's presence in this current moment. Allah's presence running through you, Allah's presence witnessing you, Allah's presence observing you, you in the custodianship of Allah's presence. And simultaneously to breathe out or release what does not need to be carried right now. So those reflections that we did, those things that feel a bit heavy, those things that may become distractions in this moment, those things that are not here for the here and now and can be dealt with another time, in another place. And I'd like to take your hearts and souls to the holy city of Medina, as if you're standing in front of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, in his grave. And I tell you something remarkable about this Imam. There's no recognition of his sacrifices, even in death. There's no glorious shrine with the martyrs as they are in Karbala. There's just a grave. Very true to the way this Imam lived his life. When I was 14, I went on an Umrah trip, and there was a guide who took us on a journey. And he said, I'll take you to some of the maqamat on the outskirts of Medina that are about to be destroyed, because this is a pattern of the holy heritage sites being destroyed. And he said, no one's allowed to go there, but I'll take you. And I was with my family at the time. I'll take you guys to see this site. And one of the sites we came across was the house of Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam. And this man was not Shia. He was not a lover of the Ahlul Bayt. But he said, it's said that this is where the Imam wrote or mourned and grieved after the tragedy of Karbala. And I saw it, that house, in its final moments. Like, it was, construction scaffolding had already been put up. It was already filled with dust. There was nothing but the structure of this house remaining. But I saw it. And I remember thinking to myself, like, you look around just in Medina, you see all this luxury, you see all these buildings, but this simple house, not too far from the Prophet's dome. And how much grief must have been put into that place that Imam Sajjad wrote from his heart, wrote from his soul, wrote from his broken self to really express to those people that were followers of Ahlul Bayt to love and respect and have awe of God despite the pain he went through. How much work went into that? How much reflection and sitting with the grief went into that? So as you stand or imagine yourself or reflect upon yourself, really standing in front of the Imam on this day, a day that marks his greatness, what are your honest intentions? What do you hope to achieve? What do you hope to gain nearness to with him? And being specific helps. So, for example, I might say, Mola, I'm feeling a little bit tired today, but I want to benefit from your divine light. I want to benefit from your glorious soul, from your loving mercy and nature. I want a little bit of my heart to be healed today, a little bit of myself to feel aligned to your divine light. These are the kind of intentions with specificity that allow our mindfulness to become reality in our lives. Because what you pay attention to becomes your reality in life. And this is why mindfulness is so important. So I'll bring you back to the here and now, the presence of this gathering and the anchors we want to go through now. The first anchor, based on a dua in Sahifa Sajadiyah, dua 11, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam says, occupy our hearts with your remembrance from all other remembrance. Okay, and the first point I've written here is divine mindfulness, or the first anchor, is divine mindfulness is starving distraction and choosing where your attention goes in any given moment. This is what control or self-control or self-discipline or self-awareness leads to a human being doing. And on the right-hand side here, on every side, you're going to find some reflection prompts. Okay, and I'd like you to, if you like, take a note of it, write down some notes and your thoughts as we speak through this. But what consumes my attention in my day? This is a thought that we think about when we read these words. Yeah, what competes with my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What occupies my heart away from his remembrance? And is the remembrance I do for him for his sake and his sake alone? Or are there other things attached to my remembrance of God? And what I like to do is to make the du'as more applicable to ourselves is to write it in your own words. This is a very beautiful activity. Writing is highly recommended in our tradition anyways in terms of reflection. But when the Imam says, occupy our hearts with your remembrance from all other remembrance, he's essentially making a point of negation. That Allah, I recognize there are other forms of remembrance of my heart that may distract me from you in life. There are things that get heavy on the soul. There are things that compete with my attention towards you. And this doesn't mean that we don't have other things that we give attention to or we pay mind to. Islam is not a religion of escaping, yeah, and disappearing and being a nothingness. No. Islam is a religion that advocates for mindfulness in the midst of life. So even if there is a competing attention for something else, you know, it could be possession, it could be work, it could be struggles. Even if there is, that's a human journey. Yeah, it's a human journey. None of these things are meant as absolutes of just an objective that we're going to reach overnight. Not at all. It's just the human journey asks us to keep reflecting on these points so that we can keep refining our souls. So if something competes with my attention, I want to ask myself, how do I place that thing within the remembrance of God? Even our du'as sometimes, are we asking from a place of remembrance of God, or are we just telling God, Allah, this is what I think now, you know, this is what I want, that's it. Or are we saying to Allah, Allah, I come to your door with an open heart, with your remembrance. Let your remembrance show me where I need to place this thing in my life or how I need to refine this thing in my life. Seeking guidance is constant part of mindfulness. So in the affirmation I wrote is my heart was made to strive to be present with God above all else. Affirmations are statements in regards to me, I. And as I mentioned, Imam Sajjad himself does this a lot in the Sahifa. Yes, cast your gaze upon me, your loving, affectionate gaze upon me. He's not always saying our hearts or we or someone else. He's saying me and my relationship with God is at the heart of the divine vessel I carry. Therefore, I need to be aware of it. Okay, so the question is, how do we write an affirmation? As I've written here, he is my priority. To be occupied by his remembrance is my goal. Translating your own language and using your own language sometimes helps you to anchor in something and to turn it from just theory or just words on a page to something that means something to you as well. So I encourage you all to share or write down your affirmations. And if you'd like to share in the comment box, you can. I'm just trying to see. yes, I will try and make the slides available afterwards to the question. And yes, so if you'd like to share any affirmations or any reflections you have on what your divine mindfulness is based on this dua, please feel free and go ahead. And I will keep moving along and look at the comments periodically. So the second anchor is divine mindfulness is self-honesty. And I love this one. I really love this one because all mindfulness begins with a permission to allow yourself to be completely honest. And sometimes human beings struggle with this. Many times human beings struggles with this. And ultimately this lack of honesty is also what leads to a deterioration of faith in the heart. Because to be with God, you have to be present with him, like I said, with the whole of you, with all that you are, with your struggles, with your challenges, with your positives, with your strengths, with everything that you hope to be fulfilled and completed by the mercy of God. We're not here to negate any aspect or pretend there are aspects of the self that don't exist. We're here to just be honest. And honesty in itself is such a healing thing, is it not? When you're able to be held and seen for who you are, is that not a beautiful feeling? When the audience standing in front of you wants your honesty, is that not a beautiful feeling? So self-honesty, Imam Sajjad, he does this very masterfully and beautifully. And in this passage from Dua 9 and Sahifa Sajjadiyah, I've highlighted here in matching colors the juxtapositions the Imam's using, the paradoxical statements, okay? On the first hand, he's saying, "O God, place us amongst those whose habit is rejoicing in you and yearning for you." The second line, "whose time is spent in sighing and moaning." I don't know about you, but if that was me, if I was rejoicing, I would not be sighing and moaning. Yeah, I would just be like, I'm happy, I'm here, I'm just in my happiness. This is me, cool, having fun. How does a person hold rejoice and sighing and moaning within two lines of each other? How does a person hold this simultaneously in their heart in one go, in the same present moment, and recognizing this is my aspiration, in fact, it's not just my state, this is what I hope to be. Place me amongst those who are rejoicing whilst also sighing and holding this grief of what this world is. Their foreheads are bowed down before your mightiness, their eyes are wakeful in your service. Again, how are your eyes bowed down but also wakeful? It's a question to be asked, right? The next line, their tears flowing in dread of you, their hearts fixed upon your love. SubhanAllah, go back to the first point where I said, khawf, with divine mercy. Yeah, the dread of Allah is his love. The fear of Allah, the reverential respect of Allah that we have in our hearts, not to do harm, not to sin, not to harm others, is because of our love for him. Love is never far away from that fear and respect. The fact that the Imam is saying simultaneously, make these two states exist in me. Yes, give me love, and also give me that fear and respect. Their cause shaken with awe of you. And the natural result of holding love and hope and fear in the heart simultaneously is this deep awe and reverence for God. Is understanding, as Imam Sadiq alayhi salam actually says, hope for Allah with a hope of someone who does not seek to disobey him. So yes, have hope in Allah, but don't cross the boundary of God. Don't disrespect God. Don't try to disrespect God and normalize that. But he also says, make me have fear of you to the point that I don't decline myself of your mercy. I don't deprive myself of being aware of your mercy. There are traditions that say faith is between these two things, fear and hope. And if you look at the Sa'i in Umrah in Mecca, the two mountains Lady Hajra walks through, they say in some mystical traditions that one mountain represents fear and one mountain represents hope. Her running back and forth between fear and hope, fear and hope. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the situation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I have hope in you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I don't know the answer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I trust you. Okay, so the believer is constantly moving. And the point about self-honesty we want to make here is that you can be honest about your spectrums you hold in any given moment. So I can be present here. I can be sad for what's happening in this world. I can be sad and aggrieved for things that I might be struggling with. I can be grateful and happy to be amongst a gathering of believers simultaneously, all at once. And the idea of this, and even in therapy, in DBT therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, You're encouraged not to see the world in just this black and white reactivity. There's nuance in opposing forces. There's clarity to be found. There's wisdom to be found in the spectrums we as human beings hold. It's far less punishing. It's far less judgmental. It's far less harsh in its intonation when you understand human being has a process. A human being has a journey. A human being is moving. Okay, so honesty in itself is a movement. It's not a one-time affair. It's something that happens again and again out of choice and willing intention. So the prompt here is what is one thing you can admit to yourself honestly about your faith journey in the present moment? So what is one thing that really speaks to you about where you find yourself with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And I encourage honesty always in a person's faith journey because it's what leads to healing. It's what leads to building a relationship with God that is genuine. When you love someone, you want honesty. When you love someone, you want respect. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not just anyone. He is the entire presence, audience, awareness, love that a person has in their life. So Allah is most owing or most deserving of our honesty with ourselves. I'm going to allow you to reflect on that. And if anybody would like to share, Shaista's written a reflection on the affirmation. So what consumes the upbringing of my child? My own affirmation is, oh Allah, give us the strength to enrich her life so that she grows and becomes closer in remembrance of you. What a beautiful affirmation. Yeah, I love that. Um, it's so beautiful because of the selflessness of that affirmation, you know? And it's a very beautiful point, Shaista, because our affirmations are not just about our personal journeys. It's also affecting those around us, those we love, children, as you've mentioned, putting the idea of having a child into the custodianship of God. This is exactly the essence of what we're talking about here in terms of the paradigm of God and returning everything to the paradigm of God. So the next slide, just mindful of time, is that divine mindfulness is anchored in a movement of love. I love this, like this whole concept of Imam Sajjad's divine love, how it enshrines the Sahifa, but specifically Dua Muhibbin, the dua of the lovers. And it's just so beautiful. It's so beautiful because he says, I ask from you love for you, love for those who love you. The thing with that statement is that Imam Sajjad always recognizes in his prayers that even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when I ask you, I can ask you. But even my asking from you, even my wanting to love you, I ask from you. Even my wanting to be present with you, even me wanting to have an intention in front of you, I have to first ask you permission. I have to first ask you, Allah. Allah, you open the gateways of my heart. You accept me. You turn my intention into something meaningful. You make my love blossom in my heart. This is where faith comes in. The belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can intervene between you and yourself. And this is what the Sahifa is so masterful in doing. Sahifa Sajadiya is a masterful piece of work that genuinely highlights how a person's every poverty and need before God and every existential breath is reliant on God. And to be successful in any shape or form, dunya and akhirah and the process of life and the journey of life can only come with his love and acceptance and his invitation. As I said, the return to the origin, the return of his invitation. So he mentions Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, love for every work which will join me to your nearness. And that you make yourself more beloved to me than anything other than you. And in this moment, I just want to say, when the Imam says things like this, these words of love for every work which will join me to your nearness, and you are here for his love today, I want you to know that's also fulfillment of his dua. And again, this is something that my teacher inspires in me to know this, that it's important to recognize that they, as much as you love them, their love for you is even more. Their love for you is even greater. So your intention to want to be here to honor, commemorate the Imam, it's also coming from him from with a force that's far greater because of his extensive capacity to hold Allah's love to a degree that is so much greater. So this is where we recognize the awliya of Allah, the Imams of Allah, as also the representation of his love on this earth. And again, he talks about negation, that you make yourself more beloved to me than anything other than you. What a powerful line. Again, Imam Sajjad is literally reinforcing Tawheed at every point. Allah, there is no God but you. You are the one I worship. Yes, I can love in this world good things. I can appreciate good people. I can honor and revere those around me, those things or blessings in my life, those means that you have sent to me. I can even understand trials and tribulations as coming from you, and I can also say shukr for that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I want to know that every one of those things comes from you as a ray of light. But you are that which is beyond. As he says, Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. He declares himself in the Holy Quran, I am the light of the heavens and the earth. Meaning that every source of goodness ultimately comes from the essence and the origin, which is God. And that is the hope and the aspiration of someone who sits with the Imam and seeks to connect to these words. So I ask you a question here. What does it mean to love Allah for Allah's sake alone? This is very interesting, right? Because I can I can, for example, speak here today, and I do it because I love my community, I love people, I love, God conscious, good human beings, and just connecting with you is a pleasure. But what does it mean to do it for Allah's sake alone? It means that even if I do this with the intention for Allah, and even nothing comes of it, say something happens or XYZ, God forbid something happened to the event, it got cancelled. Doesn't matter because my intention was with God. Yeah, my intention was Allah's pleasure. And Allah's pleasure in privacy is the most powerful form of divine mindfulness because there's no audience other than God. And that's recognizing that Allah is the entire audience. I don't need an audience other than God. Yeah, Allah is my essence, Allah is my origin, Allah is my desire, my yearning, my love. So I want His acceptance. One of the ways that we train ourselves in divine mindfulness is repetition of acts that are done with sincerity for Allah alone. Acts that have no strings attached other than God. So for example, the charity you do in private, the brother who's suffering that you go and check up on, the person with mental health struggles that you go and ask about, the friend who you know has been very quiet recently, what's going on? It's those acts that don't come with a sense of anything other than I'm doing this for the sake of Allah. This person or this thing or this means in my life is something that Allah would love me to honor. Allah would love me to do goodness with. So this is what it means. And like I said, to reflect on what those things could be that you personally can increase in your life for His sake alone is a huge, it's a point of wisdom, and a wisdom that can be developed and repeatedly made conscious of in our lives. So the next point is divine mindfulness is slowing down. So I'm going to go through the last ones with a bit more pace. And like I said, please do keep the reflections on the side in mind, and share your reflections. Please do as much as you'd like to in the comment section. Imam Ali says, beware of haste. Indeed, it bears the fruit of regret. Sabr is one of the most beautiful forms of divine mindfulness because it means slowing down to tap into the wisdom and seek guidance from God. Sabr is realizing our ego selves, ourselves, don't have all the answers, that we rest on God, we rest on turning to God for our answers. Imam Ali says patience in the face of tribulation is better than well-being in times of comfort. So although when we go through struggles and pain in life, we want a sense of well-being we aspire to. But again, think back to the spectrums of nuance. You may have well-being in a time of comfort. You may also face the trial of tribulation even within well-being. You may go through a tribulation. You may also have well-being or moments of well-being within the tribulation. The point of going through this journey of mindfulness and presence and awareness is so you know when to enact that sense of patience. When do you need to do a good deed? Because there are also narrations that say hurrying up to do a good deed is very recommended. So if you have a thought of a good action, go ahead. Where does that differ from haste? Because haste is asking us, what is the bigger picture? What are the consequences? The thing with a good deed is that if nothing negative can come of it, why question? Why stop? Go for it. Charge with all that you can. Go for it with all that you are. Invest in that intention to please God. But where there is a situation that requires patience, anchoring, mindfulness, wisdom, centeredness, calm, that's wisdom. Imam Sajjad, I bring him into this conversation because where would Islam have been if Imam Sajjad acted with haste on the day of Ashura? If he hurried up and said, in a survival mode, which would have been very understandable of his position, yeah, if it was a normal person in that situation, they're seeing their father being abused emotionally, physically, mentally, in every way, seeing their brothers shaheed and martyred on the battlefield, seeing their sisters tormented, seeing children being abused. What in your right mind would a person think of doing? This is what psychology says: fight, flight, freeze. That is the most common response to threat of a human being, is to either react and fight who's fighting you, either to run away and escape a situation out of fear, or to just freeze where your nervous system locks down. But Imam Sajjad, this is the exact moment where spiritual insight and well-being, he's given an instruction from the Imam of his time. Does he try to fight? Of course. He's a brave lion and warrior, this Imam. He's not anybody who is fragile and just weak, even in a state of sickness. His soul is a lion from the lions of God. His light is the nur of our Prophet ﷺ on that battlefield. And his wazifa amounts to that level of patience that amounts to his maqam. Had he acted out of haste, where are we today? We don't have these beautiful words to reflect on. We don't have this legacy to look at. We don't understand what it means to heal after trauma and pain the way that Imam Sajjad did. So the question with Imam Sajjad, and owing to this Imam with respect to him, is that his sabr had no end. And this is the difference with the maqam of an infallible. In life, we pray for solutions, we pray for outcomes, we pray to understand how to get through a situation in a way that's healing. But his sabr didn't come to an end, you know? He never had his loved ones back. He could never see their beautiful faces again. He could never return to that time in his life. His life was literally owing to the submission of the reality that Allah is all that he had. Allah was his entire audience. Allah was the holder of his pain. Allah was the one that gave him his solutions and answers. Allah is the one that inspired the Sahifa. Allah is the one that enabled him to be present in nights of worship. If Imam Sajjad didn't spend his nights and years in worship the way that he did, such that he became the adornment, Zayn al-Abidin, adornment of worshippers, what would he have done with all this pain and trauma? How would he have lived life? He suffered for the rest of his life. It never left him. But in that, he still chose sabr, and he still chose presence, and he still chose divine mindfulness. The next anchor is being anchored in God's mercy. And as I mentioned, Allah's remembrance itself elicits mercy. And these are the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen himself. Okay, the mercy of Allah is existential, but there are acts that we do that elicit even more an increase of the mercy of God. And divine consciousness, mindfulness, spiritual awareness, this concept enables the mercy of Allah to enshrine your life. When Allah has mercy on you, He guides you. When He guides you, He takes you on your journey towards Him. When He gives you a journey, He gives you the destiny that is good for you in service to Him. He gives you the wholeness of what it means to be on your journey. So in this dua, again, dua 9, oblige me by allowing me to gaze upon you. Again, look at the adab of the Imam's words. Allow me, oblige me, allow me to gaze upon you. I don't just come into your presence, God. I don't just come into your presence with entitlement, with a sense of arrogance, with a sense of believing that it's my right to be answered to and to be held. No, I understand that I seek your permission. Gaze upon me with the eye of affection and tenderness. Turn not your face away from me, and make me one of those people of happiness with you and a favored position, or responder, or most merciful of the merciful. The question here and the reflection that I'd really like to bring your attention to is, if I truly believed Allah looks upon me with mercy, how do I speak to myself and how do I speak to others? How does that change today? If I was to really believe Allah looks at me as the most merciful of merciful, Allah enables me to turn to Him, but is looking at me with this eye of knowing that His servant has turned to Him, therefore He wants to embrace me with His love and mercy. How might I act in a way that's different today? Would I be more soft? Would I be more tender? Would I be more patient? Would I be more understanding that I'm existentially loved? I'm existentially embraced in mercy. I don't need to prove myself. I don't need to go deeper into my insecurities as a human being because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is holding me in His mercy. And Allah is enough. Allah is always enough. Allah is all that we need in that sense. So Imam Ali says that spreading mercy to Allah also elicits the descent of Allah's mercy. We cannot show mercy unless we embody mercy, unless we truly understand when we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that even when we turn to Him with accountability or mistakes or sins, even then His mercy is present. And this takes us to the next anchor, which is that divine mindfulness is looking at yourself with accountability whilst remaining in God's mercy. And I really don't need to say much here because Imam Sajjad's two du'as, which are in regards to repentance, really highlight what I'm trying to say here. So I will just read from what the Imam says. Dua Tawbah, the dua of repentance in Sahifa Sajjadiyah, arguably the epitome of what it means to turn to God in a state of humility, in a state of repentance. How does Imam Sajjad start? O God, O He whom the description of the describers does not encompass. O He whom the hope of the hopeful does not pass by. O He with whom the reward of the good doers is not lost. O He who is the utmost limit of the fear of the worshippers. Imam Sajjad is actively holding fear, hope, and a good expectation and opinion of God. And this is in the maqam of repentance. So what about the maqam of other places, of wishes, of hopes, of desires that are godly? Imam Sajjad starts accountability and mindfulness with the presence of the awareness of Allah's mercy. And never once is a sahifa separate from an awareness of Allah's mercy, even in accountability. And then in the dua of confession in dua 12, he mentions that there are three things that hold me back from asking you, my Lord, but there's one quality of yours that drives me towards asking you despite these three things. He says, I'm held back by a command you ordered, but I delayed it. So this is when delay is wrong, yeah? When there's a good action to do, but it's delayed. A prohibition, you forbade me, but I hastened towards it. Something that's, forbidden, but again, haste used negatively, I moved towards something without a sense of mindfulness. A blessing you bestowed upon me, but I fell short in thanking it. How can a person be grateful if they're not mindful? Yeah, gratitude comes from mindfulness. Gratitude comes from being anchored in Allah's mercy to recognize that this gratitude is from a sense of being aware that this person, this blessing in my life, this feeling, it's all coming from God. Yeah, and to be aware of that first is what leads to the gratitude. And then the Imam says, what drives me to ask you, despite all my mistakes in this, is your grace upon those who turn their faces towards you. SubhanAllah. Approach you with good expectation. For all of your kindness is grace, and all of your blessings are without a cause. Allah is the one entity in this universe and His divine lights that don't love you for the sake of, for example, because you're born into that love, because you had a relationship of developing this with your friendships, XYZ, because there's a need, there's a co-worker, there's this relationship. No, Allah is the one entity who loves you unconditionally, without strings attached, being who you are, seeing your flaws, recognizing your mistakes, and still looks at you more tenderly than your own mother, looks at you with a mercy that nothing else in this world will ever give you. And he says, so here I am, my God, standing at the door of your might, like a submissive, humbled one. Where does Imam Sajjad's humility come from? Reverential respect of God, because of his nature of divine mercy. Asking you in shame like the needy, destitute beggar. Why? Because when I sin, I'm harming myself. All you ask me to do, my beloved, kind Lord, is be good to myself and others. That's it. So when I'm harming myself, it's just harming myself. I'm ashamed that despite all this mercy you show me, there's still this element of harm happening. Of course, that would make a person feel ashamed because he's so kind, he's so generous, he's so loving. This takes me to the last anchor, which is divine mindfulness is knowing your soul's capacity. Okay, so where might I need to recognize what is in my ability and capacity? Just keep this in your mind. It's not for us to be everywhere, doing everything all at once. Divine mindfulness, and indeed mindfulness, is the idea of anchoring in centeredness in any given moment. Imam Sajjad is a perfect example of this on the day of Ashura, again, because his duty is based on his ability and capability. Imam Sajjad was unwell. Yes. So as a result, his soul's capacity meant that, of course, there's divine wisdom, but the Zahir excuse was that he was unwell. He was unable to fight. He was not someone deemed engaged within the battle. Of course, he wanted to, but even in that, a difficult situation, Allah used. The sickness was, in fact, the excuse for the imamate of Imam Sajjad. It was an excuse for the divine plan of God. His soul's capacity in that moment was not a betrayal of the self, was not a weakness of self. It was not a deprivation of self. It was, in fact, his full manifestation according to the wisdom of Allah. The wisdom that is you and I sat here today talking about Sahifa Sajadiyah, how many years on? The wisdom of knowing that this Imam develops only beauty, expresses only beauty in the face of what he has gone through. And not beauty, like I said, negating the hardship or the pain or the suffering. No, a beauty that's centered on God. So his capacity in Karbala allowed him to pass through the will of God, with trusting the will of God, with trusting that this was his situation in that given moment. And I'm sure his heart of hearts, he wanted to fight that day. I'm sure with everything in him must have broken not to be able to fight on that day. Because what does it mean to live a life beyond that? What does it mean to live a life beyond Abu Abdullah alayhi salam and their luminous faces and their love that they gave him for the majority of his life? What did he know of a life without that love? What kind of fear comes over a person when they have to enter a new beginning, a new paradigm, not knowing what's ahead? But all I know is in my current present moment, this is where Allah wants me to be. This is where I'm going to anchor in my divine mindfulness. This is where I'm present. Just to wrap up, and I'd like to ask your thoughts before we do, but just to wrap up a few thoughts. The importance of divine mindfulness is witnessed when we witness the absence of it. You see the world today and tyrants, they are the biggest example of individuals who are devoid of any sense of mindfulness, let alone divine mindfulness. People who have no consequences of action, people who cause disarray and oppression, people who harm the rights of others. Because a man who is divinely anchored in his mindfulness, when he writes Sahifa Sajadiyah and Risalat al-Huquq, talks about the rights of every organ of that body, it comes from his existential understanding of divine mindfulness, of the humanity and the divinity found in the human journey. This is what Imam Sajjad fights oppression with, is with manifesting the peak of his light through goodness, by showing people. Because perhaps, when he says, it is no small wonder if man is given salvation on the day of resurrection. Rather, what is a wonder is how he manages to end up in eternal damnation in spite of Allah's encompassing mercy. The Imam is saying, I'm not surprised when Allah shows mercy on people. I'm not surprised when Allah shows mercy on sinners. I am surprised at the one that continues in a path of eternal damnation, continues on a path of heedlessness and divine mindlessness. And maybe he uttered that statement because he hurt so much of the absence of humanity that he saw. Maybe because he saw the very real effects of what divine mindlessness results in at the most epitomized level, at the most peak level. Maybe he saw the absence of divinity in his father's killers. And maybe that's what prompted him to write of the essence of what he knew life was supposed to be. This journey of divine mindfulness, not a journey of heedlessness. And maybe the mindlessness of seeing his father's head poked in Sham. Maybe the mindlessness of those people that dragged the women and the children by chains and himself. And despite that, in the Sahifa, he writes words of praise of God. Your kindness has put a neck collar on me. He's saying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your kindness has put a neck collar on me. This is a man who knows what it means to walk and to journey with a collar on his neck, holding him, materially constricting him. But his divine mindfulness allowed him and enabled him to exceed and transcend through all that pain into a divine mindfulness that became immortalized. This is Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, an eternal treasure, not just for this time, but every time. And when we look for a manual or a sense of knowing, those moments when you feel ashamed in your sins or you feel ashamed of the mistakes, I ask you today, sincerely, just sister to my brethren in faith, open up Sahifa Sajadiya. Open up Sahifa when you don't have the words. When you want to turn to God, but you feel ashamed. When you want to turn to God, but you don't know what it feels like to believe or feel His mercy in that moment. This is when the Sahifa is there for you and I to ultimately bring this reflection. Where can we fill our mindlessness in our life with divine mindfulness? Where am I lacking? Where do I need more? Where am I inspired? Where do I want hope and mercy? Raja, I want fear. I want khawf. I want this taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be a part of my journey. Where can I increase that? Where can I go against the desires of the lower self to enable a God-driven humanity, a God-driven mindfulness through everything that I do? Whether that's worship, confronting oppression, being present in the suffering, processing the suffering. It's all the holistic journey of the soul. And every part of it goes hand in hand and is there to be observed, to be managed, and to be transmuted and alchemized into divine beauty, as Imam Sajjad did. I would like to wrap up the session there. This was supposed to be more interactive, so I will leave you with this reflection here. He says in this dua, "O Allah, complete my intention through your gentleness, rectify my certainty through what is with you, set right what is corrupt in me through your power. O Allah, bless Muhammad and his household. Spare me the concerns which distract me. Employ me in that which you will ask me about tomorrow, and let my days pass in that which you have created for me." How might we live our lives if this was our guiding affirmation? And a final note, see how personal this dua is. Your divine journey, your personal duas, they matter. They always matter. Your soul matters in this journey towards God. Confronting the injustices of the time is equally about manifesting the goodness in our own souls and aligning through that light of goodness to create a force of goodness that inevitably outweighs the darkness in this world. Any thoughts and questions just before we wrap up, Shaista? I'm going to bring you here. I'm actually locked on my screen at the moment, so I need to try and find a way to look at the chat bar.
No problem. We do have a comment in there, so let me know if you can see it. Yes, the recording will be sent out. Inshallah, we hope to get that sent out via the NASIMCO post, so be sure to be subscribed to the NASIMCO newsletters, inshallah.
Yes. The answer to my question is Zainab. We need to make space in our everyday lives to slow down and reflect with depth and quality, not in a rush, tick box fashion. Many of us are stuck in cycles, at times not so healthy ones, and it can feel scary to break them and go out of our comfort zone. 100%. This is very, very true. Slowing down. I mean, I want to recognize that in all of this that we've covered today, in everything that we've spoken about today, there is a lot of theory there. There's a lot of reflection. But even taking one thing, one reflection, like Zainab, you've so beautifully encapsulated here, to make space in everyday life to slow down, that is one thing that you could take forward from this session, a practical tip, you know? So I do encourage you all to reflect and do that as well. And like I said, don't overwhelm yourself. We're not supposed to have these answers overnight, or I'm not supposed to be a absolute spiritual genius by the end of the session, nothing like that. We just want to be on our human journey, authentic in that and real with ourselves in terms of where we find ourselves.
Absolutely.
Let's see the first 3 slides. Shall I send you the slides?
Yes, please. And then inshallah, for those who joined us late, not to worry. Inshallah, we'll have the recording sent out along with the slides as well during the NASIMCO post. I think that's the plan, to send it through the
Yeah,
newsletter, inshallah. So we will have that ready for you guys.
amazing. And should I put the slides up, or you want to just forward it on
Yes, if you
script?
could just send it to me by email, then inshallah
Yes.
I can send it out.
Amazing. Thank
All
you,
right.
Shams.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for this beautiful, beautiful session. I think everyone who has joined us today has understood something, if not taken even one thing from us from this session. The idea of mindfulness is really about giving yourself accountability. I think that stuck with me the most. And the idea of being present with just one thing instead of splitting ourselves across many different tasks is probably the most important thing we need to kind of keep in mind, especially in this day and age with everything that's going on and things being so fast paced. Unfortunately, time is of the essence. And so we really do need to be as present as possible. So I appreciate that so much for emphasizing that through Imam Sajjad, alhamdulillah. So thank you so much again for joining us today. Thank you all for being part of this session. Of course, we understand a lot of people may have missed out, but not to worry. We will be sending the slides and the recording via the NASIMCO post and also be having it sent out to all those who registered for this session, inshallah. So thank you all once again. Thank you, Sarah, for joining us. And if you have any other suggestions or comments, please do email us so that we can get more webinars out there for you all, inshallah. Once again, thank you all. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.